Coming up on The Cost of Living.
There are many independents in this country that want to grow, that want to scale up. It's a piss off a little bit that consideration wasn't brought forward first in forms of, how can we invigorate independent grocers to grow?
Giancarlo Tremarchi is an independent grocer. If Ottawa wants to do something about food prices, he thinks stores like his could help. Only the feds aren't asking. Hi, I'm Paul Haverstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. Loblaws is getting boycotted, grocery store execs are getting hauled to Parliament Hill, and yet, food is still getting more expensive. The feds think more competition in the grocery industry will help keep food prices in check. Okay, but how do you actually pull that off? Also today, do you have that one sweater in your closet that you bought 20 years ago? It was pricey, but you swallowed hard, and paid up, and hey, you still wear it. What would it mean for your bank account if all your clothes were like that? Up first, in the music biz, a stream isn't worth a download isn't worth a CD, and a CD is less than vinyl. But everyone in the industry still wants to make money. Something's got to give. And that something is us, the music fans. Growing up in Montreal in the 50s and 60s, Andy Kim listened to radio stations like WABC out of New York. The signal was weak, but to him, the message was clear.
Very simply, I always wanted to be on the radio because the songs that I loved, that I listened to on my transistor radio, they informed me about everything that I needed to have.
By 1968, the dream was real. His first single, How'd We Ever Get This Way, made the Billboard charts. And then there was Sugar. Oh, honey, honey. Sugar Sugar knocked the Stones from the top of the charts. Andy was on his way.
When I traveled to Philadelphia to do American Bandstand, and then later traveled to LA, and my songs were being played all the way across the country, that was a lot of money in my pocket.
When it came to money back then, radio was king. Every time a DJ spun one of his records, Andy got paid. He figures radio royalties made up 75% of his income. And the song that changed his financial life?
It was Rock Me Gently, because I'm the writer, I'm the artist, I'm the publisher. I collected everything. So that was my big, that's the building that I bought, or whatever it is. It's like that was just an incredible moment.
In the music business, royalties don't just go to the artist. The songwriter, publisher, and whoever owns the master recording all get a slice of the pie. Andy was all those things for Rock Me Gently.
Rock me gently, rock me slowly, take it easy, don't you know that
So twice a year, when royalties were paid out, what were those checks like?
Well, for someone like myself who grew up in the tenements, they were big checks. I mean, the discomfort in giving numbers is the fact that not everyone was lucky enough to get those. And I just think that, look, it's helped my life. I go through the roller coaster of life, but I'm not anxious about money at this point.
We're looking in the 70s, were they like six-figure checks a couple times a year? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd say that's extremely fair to say. There was more than that was had, and it was close to like so much money that you can't believe. And that is all dried up to artists today.
Turns out video didn't kill the radio star. Streaming did. More than 80% of music industry revenues now come from streaming. And the money that goes to artists? It's not like radio in Andy's day. Adam Scoose is the head of Starseed Entertainment. It's an artist management company and record label based in Toronto. He sees the size of those streaming checks, and
you're not really getting rich for the most part on the streaming side, whether you're writing or recording, unless you're kind of in that top kind of 0.1% really.
So what do the economics of streaming in 2024 mean for artists and us, the music fans? Well, we all know that artists only get fractions of a penny for every listen. Spotify, the biggest streamer, pays around 0.003 cents per stream. If a song gets 1 million streams, that's $3,000. So what about 1 billion streams? Well, that would be $3 million. That's a nice chunk of change. But then you'll hear stories like Snoop Dogg saying for his 1 billion streams, he got a check for $45,000. Now, Spotify pays out 70% of the money it takes in, but a lot of that money doesn't end up with the artist. It goes to the big music companies, Sony, Universal, Warner. So streaming is the big money in music, and it's the primary way fans listen to music. That makes it feel like the main event. But for artists, financially, it can be more of a sideshow, a promotional tool. Because now, to make money, they need people coming to their shows.
Touring is almost always the biggest share of revenue for every single artist out there. I would say if you're a heavily touring artist and you're signed to a record deal and you're signed to publishing sort of thing, your recording and publishing is probably only anywhere between 5 to 15%, I would say on average, of all of your total income.
To make ends meet today takes a lot more revenue streams. Artists sell merch, vinyl and t-shirts on their website. They have brand partnerships. If they're lucky, their music could get licensed in a movie or commercial. And they hit the road. Adam says touring now typically makes up more than 70% of revenue.
You can be looking at live revenue as low as, for $2,000 to $3,000 per show as you're hopping in the van kind of touring around. Or you could be looking at making $50,000 to $100,000 to more per show. And, when you do the quick math about how many streams it takes to get $100,000 or $50,000 versus kind of one live date, you see really quickly how the live can get up that high.
So if royalties have dried up and artists now need to make money from touring, something has to give. For music fans, that's ticket prices. Last year, for the biggest acts, ticket prices went up 23%. That's in 1 year alone. You want to see Taylor Swift? That's $330. And we know people are shelling out way more than that if they're buying from resellers. The big music industry buzzword these days is superfans. These are the top 10% of an artist's most loyal supporters. Jay Gilbert is a consultant, podcaster, and former executive with Universal Music. He says superfans are more important than ever to the music industry.
They're not only listening to the music, but they're buying the different configurations, cassette, it's a thing, vinyl, they're buying the merch, they're going to the shows. Some of them are even paying for the paid meet and greets. Not all of them can afford it. But I think it's, all of those touch points.
Superfans, on average, spend twice as much on music as the average fan. They buy t-shirts and backstage VIP meet and greets. They build vacations around going to Vegas to see U2 at the Sphere.
Some of these things, you need to be an adult with a credit card to be able to do that. It's not for everyone.
The economics of streaming are pushing music in two different directions. Live shows are becoming more expensive and more exclusive, but music in general is also more accessible than ever. For $12 a month, you can have 100 million songs in your pocket. For artists today, making it is no longer about breadth. The whole world doesn't need to hear your tune on the radio. It's about cultivating depth, figuring out how to engage enough fans who will stick with you for life and who are willing to spend.
If you were successful with a major label back in the, let's say, 80s or 90s, you didn't have to worry about a lot. All you had to worry about was writing good songs, performing those songs, maybe working the press, going to radio stations when you're on tour and doing interviews and things like that. It wasn't like it is today. And today, it's really challenging because not only do you have to write, record, tour, do press, but you have to do Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
Andy Kim didn't have to make TikToks. He left Montreal for New York with $40 in his pocket. He had one song and a secondhand guitar. Would he trade places with someone trying to break in today?
I would be in big trouble if I started right now. I have maybe 2 million spins and make $5,000. And you can't even go to a grocery store anymore without paying more than you want to pay.
It's always been about the music. But everyone has to eat. Even at 0.003 cents, a spin.
Rock me slowly, take it easy. Don't you know that I have never been loved like this before? Ain't it good? Ain't it right that you are with me here tonight? Rock me gently, rock me slowly, take it easy. Don't you know?
On your Radio and by podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. When you get dressed in the morning, maybe you're tired, groggy. The last thing you may want to do is math. But one quick calculation could change your thinking about the clothes you're putting on. Because as our producer Danielle Nerman finds, when it comes to the money tied up in your closet, less could be more.
This is like a black silk camisole. Camisole sounds like an old person word, but I think that's what you'd call it.
Mel Hanna works in IT, so she's a numbers person.
I've tracked what I've worn every day for 850 days, and so now I have like so much information, it's incredible.
Mel keeps tabs on how much she pays for every item in her wardrobe and how often she wears them.
I think a lot of people have like a really twisted perception of like, you might love something, so you think you wear it all the time, then you actually take a look at the numbers and you're like, oh, I've worn that twice in the last year.
All those numbers get uploaded to an app called Stylebook, and it calculates the cost per wear of her clothes. Like that black camisole, it cost Mel $68. Not so cheap for a tank top, but she's worn it 38 times. So the cost per wear is $1.88, and it will get cheaper the more she wears it. All that number crunching helps Mel understand how much value she's getting from her purchases.
I don't care if that t-shirt costs you $5. If you never wear it, that's $5 down the drain.
Christina Majas is a fashion influencer in Toronto, and her favorite saying about money is,
I'm too broke to buy cheap shit.
And there's a lot of cheap stuff out there. Thanks to fast fashion, Canadians are spending less on clothes today than we did a decade ago, about 30% less. And yet, our wardrobes are ballooning. And so is textile waste. According to a recent study from the University of Guelph, every year, Canadians throw out 500 million kilos of fabric items. On social media, Christina Majas talks a lot about intentional spending, investing more cash in fewer clothes. She says it's better for the environment and can save you money in the long run.
Essentially, if you buy something cheap and wear it once, then your cost per wear is going to be the cost of that garment versus buying something that might feel a little bit more expensive up front. But if you can get 10, 20, 30 wears out of it, the cost per wear has gotten you so much further, especially if it maintains its shape and quality over that time.
Now, you don't actually know how often you'll wear that cashmere sweater until you own it. So Christina says cost per wear can backfire if you use it to justify buying really expensive things you can't afford. Like that time she splurged on a pair of designer boots. She told herself,
I can wear them with all this and that. And the one time I wore them, they were so uncomfortable that I thought I was going to puke. So, I mean, there's that too.
the cost per wear on those suckers, $1,800. As for Melhana, most of her clothes are in constant rotation, with a cost per wear of about $1. And all that nerding out on numbers has really changed how she shops. Now, instead of buying 25 cheap t-shirts a year, she just buys 3 pricey ones.
That was I think the biggest mental breakthrough for me. So now I own a lot fewer pieces of clothing, but they're things I know I wear a lot of, and they're higher quality.
For The Cost of Living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. We've been grumbling about food prices for a while, but now it's more than grumbling. Thousands of Canadians are looking at Loblaws, the country's biggest grocer, and saying, nope. For the month of May, they're boycotting.
Everybody's having hard times right now, so I think it's wonderful to boycott an idea to save money.
Grocery corporations, Loblaws, they're not struggling. They're making record profits. They made record profits during the pandemic, and people like me, people who are middle class, lower middle class, working class, whatever you want to call it, it's hard. We need to put food on the table, and I think it's nice to kind of put a little bit of pressure on these corporations and buy from more local grocers wherever possible.
The federal government knows people are unhappy. It's hauled grocery execs to Parliament Hill, and now Jennifer Keane. It has even more plans?
It wants more competition. We have a lot of concentration in the Canadian grocery market. 5 big chains, Loblaws, Sobeys, Metro, Costco, Walmart, they control 80% of the market. So the idea is to introduce more competition and hopefully put some pressure on those big players to hold the line on prices.
So how does it want to make this happen?
Well, it has a couple of ideas, starting with going outside our borders. And this recommendation comes from a Competition Bureau report from last summer. The industry minister has reportedly reached out to about a dozen international grocers, asking if they would please consider setting up shop here in Canada. And we're talking about discount chains here, like Grocery Outlet Holdings in the United States or Aldi in Germany. David Soberman is a marketing prof at the Rotman School of Business in Toronto, and he says chains like Aldi, they're not fancy, but they are efficient.
They have a different way of doing business, which is they have stores that are significantly smaller. They sell at highly discounted prices, and this sector has actually done a very good job of, I think, controlling the rate at which prices go up in many countries in Europe.
They call this the Aldi effect. Aldi isn't the biggest supermarket in the UK, but a lot of people say that it keeps other chains like Tesco more competitive.
And Ottawa's hoping that if it comes here, it would do the same kind of thing here.
Yes, but David says we would need what he calls a disruptor to come in, and it would have to set up shop in a lot of locations right away.
First and foremost, what you need to be able to do is establish yourself with critical mass in terms of the footprint that you have. So I would say they'd need to have at least 150 stores. but they also need to be able to buy and rent space in locations where people currently shop. So for example, an Aldi that came into a mall that already has a Metro or a Loblaws in it could actually give consumers a lot more choice and would put a little bit of pressure on those supermarkets to price more competitively.
Could what he's describing actually work? Like a mall might have one grocery store as an anchor tenant, but you don't really see a lot of malls out there with two grocery stores.
And that's by design. A lot of chains have deals to make sure that their competitors can't move in next door. They're called restrictive property covenants, and they were allowed under the Competition Act, but they're being eliminated. So this could make it easier for a new player to move in.
Okay, so that's one thing that might help. What else would a big international grocer need to overcome if it wanted to move to Canada?
Well, they'd still have to get through some red tape. Like some of these grocery chains would have their own private label brands, and those would have to be approved for sale in Canada. And then they'd have to build a cross-country distribution system.
Well, yeah, this is the classic Canadian problem, right? We're this huge country, and it takes a lot to move stuff around.
Right? We're not Europe. We're not.
No, we are not. So what's happening here? What's being described? This is a big undertaking, and we saw what happened when other companies tried to do this, like Target. They came, they saw, they left.
And a lot of people say if Target can't do it, who can? But bringing in a foreign chain, that's just one idea on the table. There was another suggestion in that Competition Bureau report, and that is, why not help a small Canadian grocer become a big Canadian grocer?
So like a hero will rise from right here at home?
I guess so. Why not?
Well, who are we talking about?
Well, there are more than 6,000 independent grocery stores in Canada. You've got everything from Save On Foods in Western Canada, which is quite large, to ethnic specialty shops and green grocers in big cities.
There are many independents in this country that want to grow, that want to scale up, that would love to grow their impact and their market size. So we'd love to see that maybe the direction be more towards what we already have in this country than looking for an outside player.
Giancarlo Tremarchi is the owner of Vince's Market, which has 4 locations in small towns all around Toronto.
And he's already here. Other independent grocery stores are already here. How hard would it be for these kinds of stores to get bigger?
Well, that wouldn't be easy either. They'd have to take on those big competitors. Canada's grocery industry has been allowed to become very concentrated, not just at the retail level. Food companies have been gobbled up by bigger food companies. Wholesale and distribution in Ontario are now dominated by 2 players, Sobeys and Loblaws.
So these big companies, they own the grocery stores, and then they also own all the behind-the-scenes supply chain stuff.
And that means that independent grocers, like Vince's, are at a disadvantage right from the start, because if they want to buy Heinz ketchup or Fig Newtons, they have to buy from their retail competitor.
And so I get asked sometimes by my customer, are you a Sobeys? Are you a Loblaws? And I say, no, why would you think that? Well, because I see their truck at your back dock. And I have to explain to them that, oh, no, I buy from them as a wholesale customer because it's the only way that I can buy, Mr. Christie cookies.
If you're buying wholesale from Sobeys, Sobeys is for sure marking that up. And then what are you selling it for? I mean, your cost when you put it on the shelf, going to be higher than theirs.
So it's just hard to compete with the big guys on those national brands. And grocery is already a low margin business. And as Giancarlo says, in order to expand, you need money.
Capital is one thing that we know that is hard to get for a lot of people, and it's expensive. And but we know that investment is all we really need to get started.
Is he talking about governments helping with financing here in some way?
He is. He's talking about things like low-interest loans or even grants. Maybe the feds could help lower interchange fees for independent grocers. Those are the fees that retailers pay every time a customer taps their debit or credit card. Big chains are able to negotiate lower fees than small stores can.
Yeah, those interchange fees, they can add up.
They really can. Mike von Massow is a food economist with the University of Guelph, and he has another suggestion that might allow independent grocers to compete with the Big Five.
Could the independent grocers start a distribution co-op? And could the government help with that? Perhaps But then you have to get everyone singing from the same song sheet, and they're often competing with each other. So could they set up distribution co-ops? For sure they could.
If they had their own cooperative distribution system, that would mean they wouldn't have to buy from their competitors. It could mean more profit and maybe even lower prices for consumers.
But it also means building out an entirely new distribution system. And that, again, that's a pretty heavy lift.
Yeah, I'm afraid there are no shortcuts here.
All right. But Jen, let's say all this happens. Independent chains were able to get bigger, become more substantial competitors. Foreign chains came in, offered more competition. Do we know what that would mean for prices?
Competition is generally a good thing, but Mike says it could take a decade before we saw results. If the goal is to get better prices today, he says you should probably just go the tried and true route. Shop around, buy what's in season, and some of the public pressure on the big chains may even have an impact in terms of how they steer their businesses. Mike says we're already seeing that.
Both Loblaws and Sobeys say we're going to convert some of our mid-market stores to discount stores. And I think it's something like 35 or 40 stores across Canada are going to stop being whatever that is in that market and go to lower budget stores.
So maybe we see more discount stores, but that again is not exactly more new competition coming in to help food prices.
Not exactly, but it's something.
Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary, and you can now listen to the show on YouTube. Just go to the CBC News page, scroll down a bit, and there we are. Boom, it's like magic. Special thanks this week go to CBC Charlottetown's Tony Davis and Paul Palmater in Halifax. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Caroline Ferris. Our executive producer is Tracy Johnson. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Thanks for listening.